that perspective, he gives us this priority of building his church. So, any thoughts on that?
Yes.
Yeah, Amy.
Like when you were saying that I think that's why he chose fishermen as disciples, because that's what fishermen do, is they go out to cast in fish.
Yeah. That's a great picture, isn't it? Yeah.
So that's, fishers of men, and then we're called to be fishers of men. So I think it's kind of all related to what you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I imagine them. Yeah, exactly. They're casting. I mean, ask Colleen about this. She knows all about it. She catches the big ones, right? She caught a 40-inch northern. It was amazing. So you caught it, right? Like, okay, all right. So cool.
So when you said
but pulling
God,
it in,
like that, we need to seek God, or God needs to be the one, orchestrating it or beginning whatever. Would you say that because the Bible says, look at the fruit, that if there isn't fruit, then that's him highlighting, okay, it's time to look at X, Y, Z, or let's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, great question.
That's a prompting.
So fruit is definitely, I suppose that could be a number of different things, but usually when I hear Jesus talk about fruit, it seems like he's talking about the fruit in a person's life. So when you look at a person, are they, when they say, well, I'm a Christian or I'm a follower of Jesus, then he's saying you look at the fruit in their life. And if what you see contrasts with what they are saying, then they're probably not truly bearing fruit, right? As far as
So how would you tell? I think this is what she's trying to get to.
Yeah.
How would you tell? How would you gauge a church as being fruitful or not? Would you look at the individual people, or would you look at it as a whole, as far as how many? You know what I mean? How would you gauge that?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question.
I
don't know. Do you guys have any insights? I mean, I would look at the individual people.
Right.
For sure.
Would, but then you'd have to look at
a whole.
Too.
Right.
As
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Thing.
So.
I want to go back to the very beginning of what you started to say, and that caused a little question mark in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
We're all leaders. I mean, I think the concept is easy to understand, but how do you know what you're leading if you're not clear on the vision, and where's the vision come from? And you can't just say, well, God shows you the vision. No, we're here because God showed you a vision. And so you can't abdicate that. You have to accept that as, okay, I've got a vision. God called us here, called my family here.
Yeah.
And these people chose to come and worship the Lord here. So how are you presenting that? I guess I just need to understand, because spiritual leaders are of course discipled, number one, but they have a very clear, precise focus on what God is directing them to do in their life based on what their skills or what their gifts are.
Right.
So I guess my question is, if you're not the leader of this church, how do we know where we're going?
Okay. Well, I would say, God has called me to lead this church for sure.
Right.
So I'm not.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't say something that kind of indicated
it was
that I saw otherwise.
We started the talk off with, well, we're all kind of leaders, and we don't want to get caught up in titles, and I get that.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's where my brain went, because I don't agree that you are not the person that we look to.
Right.
Okay.
You are.
You need to be the person that we look to for that vision, that focus.
Whether you like it
In
or
terms
Yeah.
of where we're going. And I just want to be clear that you weren't saying that you
weren't saying
No.
didn't want that.
No, I'm not at all. No.
You've earned that.
What's that?
You've earned that.
Yes.
I mean, I would say it was a mantle that was given to me. Right.
He stepped into it. He didn't have to step into it.
Right.
But it was given to him from God.
I unplugged from Texas and moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota for that.
got all
Right.
Got us.
So, but it's a great question, and I will say this, and I'm just speaking from about me again here. Like, so for me, and I think it speaks to kind of season of our church too.
Yeah.
There have been seasons where the vision has been very clear, and there have been seasons where the vision has been a little mushy. And I would say more. I'm going to just speak to where we're at more recently, because I know it's been a topic of conversation. That leading up to about May, vision was a little mushy. And there wasn't anything that was on the horizon that was beyond, let's just keep doing what we're doing. You know what I'm saying? And that has changed right now in this season, especially with this focus on honing in on Alpha in particular. Just really felt
You're going to bring people in.
that, yeah, absolutely. And again, I just want to say that Alpha was not, I feel like Alpha was not my idea. I've known about Alpha for years. I've always wanted to do Alpha, actually. But it was only in around April or May that it became very clear. I just felt from the Lord like it's time. It's time now. And I think the timing is right, for this. So, yeah, good questions. All right. Did I answer your question, Lexi? Kind of, because I think you were talking more about kind of a ministry, right?
Well, more just like, how do you know if a church is bearing fruit or not?
If what?
If a church is bearing fruit or not, and
Right.
if it's not, is that God saying it's time to readjust things?
Yeah.
Go to the chiropractor.
Right, absolutely. So, a church, I would say, is bearing fruit if you look at the lives of the people and if there is a sense of Jesus, a sense of the presence of God in that place. And, and that's not dependent on size. Right. It's not, right? And so are we bearing fruit? I mean, I think we're still bearing fruit here, personally. Mm-hmm. Is there a time where you have to say, you know what, this season has passed on this ministry? And that happens. There are seasons of ministry. The ministry that I worked for that was, I worked for this ministry to teenagers. We had an event that had around 60,000 people at it. This was like during the time of Promise Keepers. Remember when men were like gathering all over the country? We had a youth event that had that many people at it from the U.S. and Canada. Well, now that ministry has closed its doors. Did it bear fruit? Oh my gosh, that ministry bore so much fruit. I can share with you stories of the lives that have been changed there at that ministry. But there was a season for it. And I will say this too. There were some things that I believe probably happened at that ministry that were not the Lord's plans. And that could have been part of the reason that the doors were closed. Right. So, so that's what I would say on that. I hope that answers the question. So, all right. But I hope we can all agree that the church is Jesus' idea and not our idea. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. What came to my mind is when the temple in Jerusalem was built. It had to be built to a specific specifications. Everything had to be exactly as the Lord laid out.
Yeah.
And Scripture tells us that Jesus was the chief cornerstone.
Yeah.
Jesus was love, and if the church isn't working from that cornerstone, it falls apart. It doesn't have a solid foundation. And I think that's where where you can, it says that, you can tell a tree by its fruit by love, or, that Jesus, how do you know you're my disciples if you have love?
Yeah, right.
And I think that's the whole baseline for the judge church. If they're judgmental, then that the fruit of the church isn't they're not following, or they're skewed off somehow or another.
Right. Yeah, that's a good word. Chief cornerstone. It's only Jesus. It can only be Jesus. So the other thing that that he says to Peter, which I find really interesting, is that then he talks about. He says, so you will build my church, and what will not prevail against it? The gates of hell. And I will say this, technically it's the gates of Hades. And I'm going to highlight that for a particular reason here. Because if you go back to the beginning of this chapter of Matthew 16, you will see that Jesus and his disciples are in Caesarea Philippi. All right? And here's why it's so significant. I think this is just like the coolest thing. I mean, it wasn't cool then, but I love how Jesus takes things that they're visually seeing and that maybe we miss, right? So in Caesarea Philippi, there was this big grotto, like a big, kind of like a cave, carved out of this cliff. I think it was natural from what I understand. And somehow the Jordan River actually flowed as part of this. Okay? Tripping on my words here. Caesarea Philippi was a place that was known for the worship of Pan. Have you guys heard of, you've heard of Peter Pan, but do you know who Pan is? Like Pan is like one of the Greek gods, So basically an idol, right? Pan is the one, the part goat, part man, or whatever. Okay, so there were these temples there in Caesarea Philippi. One of the temples was in front of this grotto. And in the grotto was this pool, and people would offer sacrifices in this pool. They believed that this pool was basically one of the gates to Hades. And you know that Hades was what they believed was like the pathway to the underworld, right? And so they believed that there were these passages where people went from the human world to the underworld. And that they believed that everybody went there. No, not a moral thing or anything like that, right? Okay. So here is Jesus with his disciples in Caesarea Philippi. And think of this word picture that he's giving them. Because what happens is Pan is like a sex god. Okay? He's known for eroticism. And so guess what some of the worship and sacrifices were in Caesarea Philippi? It was gross, to say the least.
Dancing naked?
I don't know.
That's what came to my mind.
Yeah.
I'll go back to sleep.
So, lots of interesting things like dancing naked, maybe. I don't know.
I embarrass myself.
Embarrass me. I'm probably flush here. And so here Jesus is saying that the church is different. Gates were also a place of defense and protection, right? And so the church is going to storm these gates. It's going to be different than this world of, idols and sacrifices and strange worship and all these grotesque practices, right? The church is going to stand against that and is going to be powerful in it. But he knows that Peter in and of himself is not, he is a rock. That's what his name means. I think that he used that for Peter because it was, now your name is always going to be a reminder that you are one of the pillars, the foundations of my church. That's pretty crazy, right? So he's like, you know what though? Peter needs power and authority, right? He can't just be from where he is to where he needs to be. He's got to have power and authority. And so this is what Jesus says. So the revelation, the call to build the church, and then he says, you can't build without power tools. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll find some screws that need to be tightened. And so I'll go grab a screwdriver and I'll start to tighten them. And I usually realize that the screwdriver is not the right tool. Now I know it's intended for the screws, But guess where the power comes from?